Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, watching the massive alien ship grow larger on the main screen. The vessel was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction, shaped like a golden flower with countless petals that seemed to shift and move in the light of distant stars. Smooth curves replaced the angular designs humans preferred, and soft lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. "Captain, they're sending another transmission," said Amy Foster from the communications station. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that everyone on the bridge shared. This was humanity's first contact with alien life, and nobody knew what to expect. "Put it through," Jake replied, straightening his uniform. He had commanded exploration vessels for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The main screen flickered and showed 3 alien beings standing in what appeared to be a vast crystal chamber. The first was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer like water. Long tentacles hung from where a human would have hair, and 4 arms moved gracefully as it spoke. The second creature looked like it was made of living metal, with joints that glowed orange, and eyes that were simple points of white light. The third being was the strangest of all. It appeared to be a cloud of purple gas contained within a transparent suit shaped roughly like a human body. The tall blue alien stepped forward and began to speak. The words came out as musical tones, but the universal translator that Lisa Adams had been working on for months converted them into clear English. "Greetings, young species of the third planet," the alien said with what might have been a smile. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. My companions are Council Speaker Thrix of the Silicon Collective and Wisdom Keeper Novos of the Gasfolk. We represent the Galactic Council, the governing body that has maintained peace and prosperity throughout this galaxy for over 10,000 of your years." Jake glanced at his science officer, Lisa Adams, who was frantically taking notes on her tablet. Her eyes were wide with wonder as she recorded every detail of the alien's appearance and technology. Paul Collins, the navigator, was equally fascinated but kept one hand near the emergency jump controls, ready to get them out of there if things went wrong. "We are honored to meet you," Jake replied carefully. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Terra Nova. We represent the United Earth government and our colony worlds." Ambassador Veltar's tentacles swayed in what the computer identified as a pleased gesture. "Excellent. We have been observing your species for some time now, and we are impressed by your rapid technological development. Your ability to achieve faster-than-light travel in such a short time shows great promise. You've been watching us?" Amy asked, forgetting protocol for a moment. "Of course," the metallic being called Thrix said, its voice sounding like wind chimes in a storm. "The Council monitors all developing species. It is our duty to guide younger races toward civilization and peace. We have come to offer humanity a great gift." Lisa leaned forward in her chair. As the ship's science officer, she was responsible for gathering as much information as possible about these aliens and their technology. "What kind of gift?" The purple gas creature Novos spoke for the first time. Its voice was soft and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The gift of membership in our great alliance. For 10 millennia, the Galactic Council has maintained perfect peace among its member species. Wars are a thing of the past. Hunger, disease, and want have been eliminated. All beings live in harmony under our guidance." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the way the alien said guidance didn't sit right with him. Ambassador Veltar continued the presentation. "We offer humanity the chance to join as a protected species under Tier 7 status. This is a generous offer that we extend only to the most promising young races." "What does that mean exactly?" Jake asked. The aliens exchanged glances, or what passed for glances among their species. "It means that humanity will receive all the benefits of council membership," Veltar explained. "Advanced technology that will solve your energy problems and extend your lifespans, protection from hostile forces that roam the galaxy, access to thousands of worlds suitable for colonization." Paul looked up from his navigation console. And what do we have to give in return? Speaker Thrix's metallic form seemed to brighten. Very little, really. Simply compliance with council standards for civilized behavior. Lisa's stylus stopped moving across her tablet. What kind of standards? Basic requirements for peaceful coexistence, Novo said in its whispered voice. All weapons must be surrendered to council authorities for proper disposal. Military forces will be disbanded and replaced with council peacekeepers. Population growth must be regulated to prevent resource conflicts. Jake's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. Go on. Ambassador Veltar's tentacles waved enthusiastically. Your species will need to relocate from approximately 80% of your current worlds to make room for more advanced races who can make better use of those resources. This is standard procedure and will be handled humanely over the course of several generations. Amy's face had gone pale. You want us to give up our worlds? Only the ones you don't truly need, Thrix assured her. The council will provide new homes that are perfectly suitable for human habitation. There is one more small requirement, Novos added. Genetic modifications will be necessary to make humans more compatible with galactic civilization. Nothing drastic, simply adjustments to reduce aggressive tendencies and increase cooperation instincts. The bridge of the Terra Nova fell silent. Jake could hear the hum of the ship's engines and the quiet beeping of various instruments. But nobody spoke for several long seconds. Lisa was the first to find her voice. You want to change our DNA? Only to help you, Veltar said gently. Aggression is the root of all conflict. Once that trait is removed, humans will be much happier and more peaceful. Jake stood up slowly from his captain's chair. Behind him, he could hear Paul's fingers hovering over the emergency jump controls. Amy was gripping her console so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Jake said in a voice that had gone very quiet and very cold. You want us to give up our weapons, disband our militaries, abandon most of our worlds, submit to your population controls, and let you genetically alter us to remove parts of our humanity that you don't like. And in return you'll give us advanced technology and protection. Precisely, all three aliens said in perfect unison, their voices blending into an eerie harmony. Jake looked at each member of his crew. Lisa gave him a small nod. Paul's hand moved closer to the jump controls. Amy straightened in her chair and met his eyes with a determined expression. Ambassador Veltar, Speaker Thrix, Wisdom Keeper Novos, Jake said formally. I want to thank you for traveling all this way to make your offer to humanity. The aliens seemed pleased. Veltar's tentacles swayed happily and Thrix's form brightened noticeably. On behalf of the human race, Jake continued, I can give you our answer right now. He paused for a moment, looking directly into what he assumed were the alien's eyes. Absolutely not. The silence that followed was deafening. The three council representatives stood frozen, as if they couldn't process what they had just heard. I'm sorry, Veltar finally said, its musical voice filled with confusion. Could you repeat that? Our translators may have malfunctioned. You heard me correctly, Jake replied. The answer is no. Humanity rejects your offer. Speaker Thrix's form flickered with what might have been alarm. But this is impossible. No species has ever refused council membership. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly, Jake said. You're offering us slavery with a pretty bow on top. You want to take away everything that makes us human and turn us into docile pets. You are making a terrible mistake, Novos whispered, its gas form swirling more rapidly within its containment suit. Species that refuse council protection face classification as rogue entities. The combined fleets of our member worlds will be forced to take corrective action. Jake smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Are you threatening us, Ambassador? We are trying to save you from yourselves, Veltar said desperately. Primitive species always choose conflict over cooperation. Without our guidance, you will destroy yourselves or force us to do it for you. Then I guess we'll see you in battle, Jake said calmly. He turned to his communications officer. Amy, cut the transmission. Wait, Veltar called out. You must reconsider. We have weapons beyond your comprehension. Fleets numbering in the tens of thousands. You cannot possibly Terra Nova out, Jake said. The screen went black. Paul's hands flew over his controls. Jump coordinates locked in, Captain. Ready to engage on your command. Do it, Jake ordered. The stars outside stretched into lines of light as the Terra Nova leaped into hyperspace, leaving the massive council ship behind. In the silence that followed, Lisa finally spoke up. Well, she said quietly, I guess we just started humanity's first interstellar war. Jake settled back into his captain's chair and smiled grimly. No, Lisa, we just told the galaxy that humanity doesn't kneel to anyone. The emergency session on Nexus Prime had been going for 6 hours, and Ambassador Veltar was beginning to understand why his species had given up caffeine stimulants 3,000 years ago. The massive council chamber buzzed with confused voices from dozens of different species, all trying to make sense of what had just happened with the humans. This is unprecedented, declared High Speaker Morden of the crystalline hegemony, his rocky form shifting colors from blue to deep purple. In agitation? In 10,000 years of council expansion, no species has ever rejected our generous offer of membership. Veltara's tentacles drooped with exhaustion. He had been explaining the same thing over and over to increasingly upset council members. I assure you, the translation was correct. The human captain said, and I quote, exactly, absolutely not. There was no misunderstanding. War Commander Jeleneth of the military caste stood up from his position near the back of the chamber. His species looked like giant insects covered in metal armor, and when he was angry, the plates on his back rattled ominously. Perhaps they simply need time to consider our offer properly. Many species require several meetings before they understand the benefits of council membership. That's what I thought too, Speaker Thrix added, his metallic form flickering with uncertainty. But their captain seemed very certain. He called our offer slavery with a pretty bow on top. A collective gasp rose from the assembled delegates. The Zephyrian ambassador Kellanara, Valtara's own sister, turned all 4 of her arms toward him in a gesture of complete shock. He said what? The exact phrase was slavery with a pretty bow on top, Valtar repeated miserably. Then he told us we would see them in battle and ended the communication. Elder Corneth of the Mindseeker caste floated forward in his mobility sphere, his large brain visible through the transparent dome that protected it. This makes no logical sense. We offered them technology thousands of years ahead of their current development. We offered them protection from the many hostile forces that roam the galaxy. We offered them worlds to colonize and guidance to prevent them from repeating the mistakes that destroyed so many primitive species. Perhaps we should examine their psychology more carefully, suggested Healer Nalthus of the Empath Guild. Her flower-like appearance and soothing voice had calmed many nervous species during first contact procedures. I have been studying. The human we have in our custody, Dr. Helen Carter, has been most cooperative in our cultural exchange program. War Commander Jeleneth S. armor plates rattled again. Bring her to the chamber. Let us hear what she has to say about her species' bizarre behavior. 20 minutes later, Dr. Helen Carter entered the council chamber under guard. She was a small woman by human standards, with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her specialty was xenobiology, and she had been thrilled when the council had invited her to study on Nexus Prime as part of the preliminary cultural exchange. Now she looked nervous but determined. Dr. Carter, Elder Corneth began in his most reasonable tone, we are trying to understand your species' reaction to our generous offer. Can you explain why your captain rejected membership in our peaceful alliance? Helen looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring at her. She had spent months learning about council culture and politics, and she understood exactly what they were asking. Because you weren't offering membership, you were offering surrender. Surrender? Veltara's tentacles quivered with confusion. We offered your species advanced technology, protection, and guidance toward a peaceful future. In exchange for our freedom, Helen replied firmly. You wanted us to give up our weapons, disband our governments, abandon our worlds, and let You change our genetic code. How is that different from conquest? Healer Nalthus leaned forward with genuine curiosity. But surely security and peace are more important than the illusion of freedom. Your species will be much happier once the genetic modifications remove your aggressive tendencies. Helen stared at the flower-like alien in amazement. You really don't understand, do you? Those aggressive tendencies are part of what makes us human. Our willingness to fight for what we believe in, our refusal to back down when we're threatened, our determination to solve our own problems, those aren't bugs in our programming that need to be fixed. They're features. War Commander Zelenoth clicked his mandibles impatiently. Aggression leads to conflict. Conflict leads to war. War leads to suffering and death. The Council has eliminated these problems. You've eliminated the possibility of growth too, Helen shot back. When was the last time any Council species developed new technology? When was the last time you explored unknown regions of space? When was the last time you faced a real challenge that forced you to become better than you were? The chamber fell silent. Helen could see the discomfort on every alien face, even the ones whose expressions she couldn't read properly. Elder Cornith was the first to recover. Growth is unnecessary when perfection has been achieved. The Council represents the highest form of civilization possible. Says who? Helen asked. You? Your ancestors? Some computer program? Who decided that peace was more important than progress, that safety was more valuable than exploration, that harmony was better than the messy, complicated, wonderful chaos of actually living? Ambassador Kilinara's tentacles were turning darker. With agitation. This is exactly the kind of thinking that leads to the destruction of primitive species. Your people will develop weapons of mass destruction, fight terrible wars, and either destroy yourselves or become a threat to peaceful civilizations. Helen smiled sadly. We already have weapons of mass destruction. We've had them for over a century. We've fought terrible wars throughout our history. We've made mistakes that cost millions of lives. But we learned from those mistakes. We grew stronger, smarter, and better. That's what humans do. We adapt, we overcome, and we improve. And if you refuse to join the Council? War Commander Zelenoth asked in a voice that carried an unmistakable threat. Then we'll deal with whatever comes next, Helen replied without hesitation. That's also what humans do. Veltar felt a growing dread in his primary stomach. Dr. Carter, you must understand that species who refuse Council membership are classified as rogue entities. Military action becomes necessary to protect the peace and stability of the galaxy. You mean you'll try to exterminate us? Helen said matter-of-factly. We will take whatever action is necessary to prevent your species from becoming a threat. To galactic civilization, Zelenoth confirmed. Helen was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was very soft. How many species have you made this offer to? Hundreds, Elder Cornith answered proudly. The Council has grown from 12 founding members to over 300 allied species. And how many refused? The pause that followed was telling. Finally, Veltar answered reluctantly. 17 species have rejected Council membership over the millennia. Where are they now? Helen asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. They are no longer a concern, War Commander. Zelenoth said coldly. Helen nodded slowly. So your generous offer is really join us or die, and you wonder why we said no? Healer Nalthus's petals were wilting with distress. But don't you understand? We're trying to save you from yourselves. Every species goes through this aggressive phase. It's natural. But it must be overcome for true civilization to flourish. Maybe, Helen admitted. Or maybe you've been so focused on avoiding conflict that you've forgotten how to handle it when it finds you anyway. Elder Cornith's brain pulsed with rapid thoughts. What do you mean by that? Helen looked directly at War Commander Zelenoth. When was the last time the Council fleets fought a real war? Not a police action against primitive species, but an actual war against an enemy that could fight back? Zelenoth's armor plates shifted uncomfortably. The last major conflict was 8,000 years ago. The Council has maintained perfect peace since then. Perfect peace, Helen repeated thoughtfully. Or perfect stagnation. Tell me, Commander, what happens when your soldiers who have never seen real combat face an enemy that's been fighting wars for its entire existence? Before Shelenith could answer, an aide rushed into the chamber and whispered something urgent into Valtar's ear. The ambassador's tentacles went completely white with shock. What is it? Elder Cornith demanded. Valtar's voice was barely audible. We're receiving reports from our monitoring stations throughout human space. Every human world is mobilizing for war. They're converting civilian vessels into warships, calling up reserves, and broadcasting recruitment messages. The response to our offer isn't panic or fear. What is it then? Healer Nalthus asked nervously. Helen smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she looked genuinely happy. Enthusiasm. You just gave humanity something we've never had before, a common enemy that threatens our entire species. Congratulations, gentlemen. You've managed to unite every human faction, government, and colony under a single purpose. War Commander Jelenith's mandibles clicked rapidly. Impossible. They cannot hope to match our fleets. Maybe not, Helen? Agreed, but they're going to try. And when humans are fighting for something they believe in, for their homes and their freedom and their right to exist as they are, they become very dangerous indeed. She paused and looked. RO General Frank Patterson stood in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon, staring at displays that showed military activity across every human world. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen mobilization on this scale. Every screen showed the same thing: humanity preparing for war with an enemy that outnumbered them by thousands to one. Sir, we have the latest recruitment numbers, reported Colonel Mike Johnson, his aide. Earth alone has received over 50 million volunteer applications in the last week. The colonies are reporting similar numbers. Frank rubbed his tired eyes. How many can we actually train and equip? If we convert every available facility and use emergency protocols, maybe 10 million in the next month. The problem isn't people willing to fight, it's equipment and ships. Dr. Sandra Hayes looked up from her workstation where she had been reviewing weapon specifications for the past 18 hours straight. We're making progress on that front. My teams have identified over 200 civilian technologies that can be weaponized with minimal modification. Give me examples. Frank said, walking over to her station. Sandra pulled up a holographic display showing various ship designs. Mining lasers can be converted into beam weapons with about 60% efficiency. Cargo haulers can carry kinetic projectiles, essentially giant bullets fired at relativistic speeds. Passenger liners can be turned into missile carriers. What about effectiveness against Council technology? Mike asked. Unknown, Sandra admitted. We have no real data on their defensive capabilities. But we're designing everything based on human military philosophy: hit hard, hit fast, and don't worry about getting home. Across the room, Admiral Rick Stone was coordinating with fleet commanders throughout human space. His weathered face showed the strain of organizing humanity's scattered forces into something resembling a unified defense. Admiral Stone to all commands, status report. The responses came in from dozens of worlds. Captain Ryan Brooks reported. From the New Angeles shipyards, civilian conversion program is ahead of schedule. We've got 300 merchant vessels armed and ready for combat operations. Captain Kelly Turner's voice crackled through from the outer colonies. Patrol squadrons are running continuous reconnaissance. No sign of Council fleets yet, but we're picking up long-range sensor contacts. Something big is moving in our direction. Intelligence. Officer Beth Williams had been tracking Council fleet movements using humanity's limited deep space monitoring network. Admiral, I'm showing massive ship concentrations at 12 different staging areas. Conservative estimate puts their total force at over 50,000 vessels. Frank whistled low. 50,000 ships. How many do we have? Approximately 3,000 combat-capable vessels if we count everything: military ships, armed civilians, converted cargo haulers, even armed shuttles, Rick replied grimly. So we're outnumbered roughly 17 to 1, Sandra said matter-of-factly. Those aren't impossible odds. Mike stared at her. How do you figure that? Because we're not fighting a traditional battle, Sandra explained. We're fighting for survival. There's a difference. On the main screen, President Maria Rodriguez appeared for her daily address to the nation. Her words were being broadcast to every human world, and the response had been overwhelming. Instead of panic, humans were volunteering in record numbers. Instead of fleeing, civilians were demanding to help with the war effort. My fellow humans, the president began, 30 days ago, we received an ultimatum from an alien alliance that calls itself the Galactic Council. They offered us a choice, surrender our freedom or face extinction. Today, I want to share with you some information that makes our choice even clearer. The screen changed to show intelligence reports that Commander Alex Chin's Special Operations Team had gathered during their covert missions to Council worlds. Alex himself appeared on screen, his face showing the exhaustion of someone who had been operating behind enemy lines for weeks. What we discovered changes everything, Alex reported. The Council's previous negotiations with other species weren't diplomatic failures, they were planned genocides. When those 17 species refused Council membership, they weren't defeated in battle. They were systematically exterminated down to the last individual. Frank felt his blood turn cold. Around the war room, officers stopped what they were doing to listen to Alex's report. The Council doesn't just want to conquer us or control us, Alex continued. They want to erase us completely and pretend we never existed. Every man, woman, and child. Every piece of human culture, art, and history. They call it corrective action for galactic peace. President Rodriguez appeared back on screen, her expression harder than granite. This is not a war for territory or resources. This is not a political conflict or a trade dispute. This is a war for the right of humanity to exist. The Council has made it clear that there will be no negotiation, no compromise, and no mercy. The intelligence reports continued with more disturbing information. Dr. Karen Foster's research team had been analyzing Council communications intercepts, and what they found made everyone in the war room sick to their stomachs. The Council views aggressive species as a contamination that must be cleansed, Karen reported via secure transmission. Their internal documents refer to species like us as biological hazards and genetic threats to galactic stability. They're not coming here to defeat us. They're coming here to sterilize us. Sandra looked up from her weapons research with murder in her eyes. Then we make sure they regret it. Frank nodded grimly. What's our timeline looking like? 3 weeks until the Council ultimatum expires, Beth reported. But intelligence suggests their fleets are already moving toward human space. First contact could happen much sooner. The war room buzzed with activity as humanity's leaders coordinated the largest military buildup in human history. Tony Martinez's engineering teams were working around the clock to design new ship classes based on a simple philosophy. Everything was expendable except the mission. Traditional ship design focuses on crew survival and long-term operation, Tony explained during his daily briefing. We're throwing that out the window. Our ships are built to destroy the enemy and complete the objective, period. If the crew survives, that's a bonus. The new designs were radical departures from human naval tradition. Instead of heavy armor and defensive systems, the ships carried maximum firepower and just enough protection to reach their targets. Instead of large crews and comfortable living spaces, they were automated wherever possible and crammed with weapons. The Council expects us to fight like they do, carefully, preserving resources, trying to minimize casualties, Tony continued. We're going to fight like humans, desperately, creatively, and with complete disregard for anything except winning. Captain Steve Adams volunteered to command the first converted passenger liner, now designated as a missile carrier. His ship, the former luxury vessel Golden Dream, had been stripped of everything except engines, life support, and launch systems for 300 nuclear missiles. It's a one-way trip, Steve told his volunteer crew during their briefing. We get close to their big ships, dump everything we've got into them, and hope we take some of them with us when they return fire. Engineer Carol Davis had converted her mining ship into something that could punch holes through capital ship armor using modified drilling equipment. The beauty of human technology is that it's all dual use, she explained to her crew. Every tool can be a weapon if you're creative. Enough. The psychological preparation was just as important as the physical preparation. Humanity had to accept that this war would cost millions of lives and that victory was far from certain. But instead of breaking under that pressure, humans seemed to grow stronger. Commander Julie Walker addressed the crews of the converted civilian fleet. The Council thinks we'll surrender when we see their numbers. They think we'll negotiate when we understand how outmatched we are. They're wrong. When humans are cornered and fighting for everything we care about, we don't surrender. We become something they've never seen before. The final piece of humanity's preparation was the most important: unity. For the first time in human history, every government, every colony, every faction was working toward the same goal. Old rivalries were forgotten, ancient grudges were set aside, and political differences became meaningless in the face of extinction. The Council made one critical mistake. President Rodriguez concluded her address. They assumed that the threat of death would make us submit. Instead, it made us remember what we're willing to die for: our freedom, our families, our future, and our right to remain human. As the transmission ended, Frank looked around the war room at the faces of humanity's military leaders. They were tired, worried, and completely outmatched by an enemy with technology thousands of years ahead of their own. But they were also determined, angry, and absolutely refusing to give up. "Gentlemen," Frank said quietly, "the Council is about to learn why predators should never corner prey that has nothing left to lose." War Commander Zelenoth stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Harmony, watching the readings on his tactical displays with growing confusion. His massive fleet of 50,000 ships had arrived at the coordinates where human resistance was expected to be strongest, but the space around them was completely empty. "Sensors show no enemy contacts," reported his tactical officer, a crystalline being whose body flickered with nervous energy. "All human military installations appear to have been abandoned." Zelenoth's mandibles clicked with irritation. His species had conquered dozens of worlds over the millennia, always following the same pattern. The primitive species would mass their forces for a desperate last stand, usually around their homeworld or most important colony. The Council fleet would arrive in overwhelming numbers, demonstrate their superiority, and accept the inevitable: surrender. "Perhaps they have finally come to their senses," suggested Fleet Admiral Torvex of the Silicon Collective, his metallic form reflecting the bridge lights. "Many species attempt to show defiance initially, but when faced with our true power, they choose survival over pride." "Begin scanning all nearby systems," Zelenoth ordered. "The humans must be somewhere in this sector." What the War Commander didn't know was that Admiral Rick Stone had positioned the human fleet using tactics learned from centuries of guerrilla warfare. Small squadrons were hidden throughout the outer systems, using asteroids and gas giant magnetic fields to mask their signatures. They had no intention of fighting a traditional battle where numbers would decide the outcome. The first attack came without warning. Captain Ryan Brooks led a squadron of 12 converted cargo haulers against a Council supply convoy that was moving through the Kepler system. The human ships appeared from behind a small moon, launched their missiles at point-blank range, and disappeared into hyperspace before the escort vessels could respond. "What was that?" Zelenoth demanded when the reports reached his flagship. "Unknown." "Sir," his communications officer replied, "we've lost contact with Transport Group 7. Last transmission indicated they were under attack by small human vessels." "Impossible," Fleet Admiral Torvex declared. "Our escorts should have detected any approaching ships long before they could pose a threat." The second attack happened 6 hours later. Captain Kelly Turner's patrol squadron hit a Council scientific vessel that was mapping human space for the invasion. Again, the human ships struck fast and hard, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. This is not how primitive species Fight, Shelleneth muttered, studying the tactical reports. They should be massing their forces for a decisive battle, not conducting these, what do the humans call them, hit-and-run attacks. The attacks continued throughout the day. Each one was small, targeted, and over before the council could respond. Human ships would appear from nowhere, destroy their target, and vanish back into the void. It was unlike anything the council had ever encountered. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from the new Texas system," the communications officer announced. "Governor Crawford is requesting immediate assistance with evacuation procedures." Shelleneth's mood improved slightly. Finally, the humans were showing sense and asking for help with their surrender. Put him through. The hologram that appeared showed a middle-aged human male with graying hair and tired eyes. Behind him, Shelleneth could see what appeared to be a busy command center with people moving equipment and data files. "This is Governor Bill Crawford of the New Texas colony," the human said. "I'm transmitting our formal surrender to the Galactic Council fleet." "Finally," Torvex muttered. "At least some humans understand the futility of resistance." "We have 50,000 civilians who need to be evacuated safely," Crawford continued. "I'm sending you the coordinates of our primary city. Can you guarantee safe passage for non-combatants?" Shelleneth felt a surge of satisfaction. This was how these situations were supposed to proceed. "Governor Crawford, I personally guarantee that all civilians will be treated according to Council humanitarian protocols. We will dispatch 500 ships to accept your surrender and begin evacuation procedures immediately." "Thank you, War Commander," Crawford replied. "New Texas out?" The transmission ended, and Shelleneth began issuing orders. 500 ships was a significant force, but the symbolic value of the first human surrender would be worth the deployment. It would show other human worlds that resistance was futile. Battle. Group Delta departed for New Texas under the command of Admiral Kexthal, a veteran officer who had overseen dozens of peaceful surrenders. The ships were primarily transports and support vessels, with only a light escort of combat ships. After all, they were going to accept a surrender, not fight a battle. What Admiral Kexthal found when he arrived at New Texas was exactly what Governor Crawford had promised: a bustling colony world with a population center that could easily house 50,000 people. The landing sites were clearly marked, and there were no signs of military resistance. "This is much more reasonable than their earlier behavior," Kexthal reported back to the main fleet. "Beginning standard occupation procedures now." The Council ships moved into low orbit and began deploying their landing craft. Everything proceeded exactly according to standard protocols. The human civilians appeared to have been evacuated as promised, leaving behind empty but intact facilities that could be easily converted for Council use. Admiral Kexthal was reviewing the preliminary occupation reports when his sensors officer made an alarming discovery. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the planetary crust. It appears to be some kind of industrial mining charges connected to the colony's fusion reactors." Kexthal felt the first stirring of unease. Mining charges? Why would they need mining charges in a civilian evacuation? The answer became horrifyingly clear 30 seconds later when Governor Crawford's face appeared on every screen in the Council fleet. "War Commander Shelleneth," Crawford said with a grim smile, "I want to thank you for accepting our surrender so readily. You should know that we did evacuate our civilians as promised. All 50,000 of them are safe aboard transport ships well outside the system." "What is the meaning of this?" Kexthal demanded. "The meaning," Crawford replied, "is that we lied about surrendering. New Texas isn't a colony anymore, it's a bomb. And you just put 500 ships right on top of it?" The realization hit Admiral Kexthal like a physical blow. "Emergency withdrawal. All ships, emergency withdrawal now." "Too late," Crawford said quietly. "Goodbye, Admiral." New Texas exploded with the force of a small star. The mining charges that had been placed throughout the planet's crust detonated simultaneously, rupturing the planetary core and triggering a chain reaction in the colony's fusion reactors. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away. Ship in Battle Group Delta was instantly vaporized. The 500 Council vessels simply ceased to exist, along with their crews of over 2 million beings. The shockwave from the explosion damaged dozens of other ships that had been stationed in the outer system. War Commander Jelenoth stared at his tactical display in complete shock. In 8,000 years of military history, his species had never lost 500 ships to a single enemy action. The concept of a species destroying their own world to kill invaders was literally beyond his comprehension. "This is impossible," Fleet Admiral Torvex whispered, his metallic form flickering rapidly. No civilized species would destroy an entire planet just to eliminate a few ships. But the attacks were just beginning. Captain Lisa Parker led a squadron of stealth-modified fighters against a Council communication relay, using electronic warfare. Techniques that the peaceful aliens had never encountered. Colonel Mike Johnson's Marines somehow managed to board and capture a Council supply ship, making off with weapons technology and strategic intelligence, the most devastating. Psychological attack came from an unexpected source. Dr. Helen Carter, still detained on Nexus Prime, had been quietly sharing information about human military history with curious Council citizens. Her detailed accounts of human conflicts, particularly concepts like total war and scorched earth tactics, spread through Council. Networks like a virus. Panic began spreading through the Council's civilian populations as they learned about species that would destroy their own worlds rather than surrender, that considered dying in battle preferable to living in defeat, and that viewed war not as an unfortunate necessity, but as an art form to be perfected. "These humans are insane," reported Senator Valinix from the Council homeworld. According to Dr. Carter's historical records, they have spent their entire existence fighting increasingly destructive wars against each other. They have weapons that can destroy entire planets, biological agents that can wipe out all life, and tactical doctrines based on the complete annihilation of their enemies. War Commander Jelenoth tried to maintain order among his fleet commanders, but confusion was spreading through the ranks. "We still outnumber them by thousands to one. Superior numbers will eventually prevail, will they?" asked Admiral Kexmore, the most experienced commander in the fleet. "These creatures just destroyed one of their own worlds and killed 500 of our ships without losing a single vessel of their own. How do you fight an enemy that considers mutual destruction a victory?" The question Admiral Rickstone stood on the bridge of his flagship, the defiant human vessel named Freedom's Price, watching the massive Council armada approach Earth on his tactical display. The enemy fleet stretched across space like a metal constellation, 50,000 ships moving in perfect formation toward humanity's homeworld. Behind them lay a trail of destruction, human colonies burned, defense stations destroyed, and millions of human lives lost in the desperate fighting retreat. "They're buying it," reported Captain Lisa Parker from her position at the tactical station. Her ship had been damaged in the last engagement, but she had refused evacuation to help coordinate the final phase of humanity's plan. Council intelligence believes we're completely defeated and falling back to Earth for a last stand. "Good," Stone replied grimly. "How many ships do we have hidden in the outer system?" 15,000 vessels, sir," answered Commander Julie. Walker, whose destroyer had been patched together with spare parts and determination. "Everything from military cruisers to converted garbage haulers. Every ship that could mount a weapon and every human willing to crew them." Stone nodded with satisfaction. The retreat to Earth had been carefully planned and executed. For 3 months, human forces had fought a series of brilliant delaying actions, always appearing to be on the verge of total collapse while actually drawing the Council fleet exactly where they wanted them. The Council believed they were chasing a broken enemy back to their homeworld for the final surrender. War Commander Jelenoth was confident as his fleet approached the Sol system. The humans had fought more creatively than expected, and their willingness to destroy their own worlds had been disturbing, but numbers always won in the end. His forces had taken heavy casualties, nearly 8,000 ships lost to human desperation and cunning, but the outcome was inevitable. "Sir, we're detecting the remnants of the human fleet in orbit around their homeworld," reported his tactical officer. Approximately 3,000 vessels in defensive positions. Excellent! Jelenoth clicked his mandibles with satisfaction. Finally, they will make their stand and we can end this madness with one decisive battle. The blue-green world of Earth hung in space ahead of them, looking peaceful and defenseless. Council intelligence had confirmed that this was humanity's birth world, the source of their species and the center of their civilization. Capturing Earth would break human resistance once and for all. Open a channel to the human fleet, Jelenoth ordered. It is time to accept their surrender and begin the final cleanup of this troublesome species. President Maria Rodriguez appeared on the main screen, standing in what appeared to be an underground bunker. Her face was tired but determined, showing no signs of defeat despite the impossible odds facing her people. War Commander Jelenoth, she said formally, I assume you're here to accept our unconditional surrender. Indeed, Jelenoth replied, feeling a surge of satisfaction. Your resistance has been admirable but futile. Surrender now, and the Council will ensure that your extinction is swift and painless. President Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, there was something in her voice that made Jelenoth feel uneasy. You know, War Commander, over the past few months you've taught us a lot about Council military doctrine. Your tactics, your strategies, your way of thinking about warfare, it's been very educational. Your point? Gilles_Nath asked suspiciously. My point is that you've been so focused on our military capabilities that you never asked the right question. Rodriguez replied with a cold smile. You never asked what kind of species willingly destroys their own worlds rather than submit to you. Before Jelenoth could respond, Admiral Stone's voice cut into the transmission. All hidden units, this is Stone, execute Operation Last Stand. Show them what humans are really made of. The space around the Council fleet suddenly erupted with activity as thousands of human ships decloaked from their hiding places throughout the asteroid belt and outer planets. They had been waiting in silence for hours, using every stealth technology humanity could devise, positioned for a coordinated attack that would catch the Council fleet completely off guard. Captain Steve Adams led the charge in his converted passenger liner, now loaded with enough nuclear weapons to crack a moon in half. All ships, this is Adams, remember what we're fighting for. For humanity. The battle cry was taken up by thousands of human voices across the fleet. Engineer Carol Davis's mining ship, bristling with improvised weapons, accelerated toward a Council battlecruiser while broadcasting her own message, freedom or death. No surrender. But what truly horrified the Council forces wasn't the surprise attack or even the ferocity of the human assault. It was the realization that human crews were deliberately ramming their ships into Council vessels, overloading their reactors to create massive explosions, and launching suicide attacks that defied every principle of civilized warfare. Commander Julie Walker's destroyer took a direct hit from a Council energy weapon that tore through her ship's hull like paper. With her vessel dying around her and half her crew already dead, she transmitted a final message that was heard throughout both fleets. This is Walker to all human ships. My reactor is going critical and I'm taking this Council bastard with me for humanity's freedom. Her destroyer plowed into the side of a massive Council battlecruiser and detonated with the force of a small sun. The explosion vaporized both ships and sent shock waves through the enemy formation. War Commander Jelenoth watched in growing horror as his carefully organized fleet began to fall apart under the human assault. These weren't the tactics of a civilized species fighting for territorial gain or political advantage. This was the desperate fury of a cornered animal fighting for its very existence. Sir, Battle Group 7 is requesting permission to withdraw, his communications officer reported with barely concealed panic. They're reporting massive casualties from human suicide attacks. Withdrawal denied, Jelenoth snapped, but even as he said it, he could see ships throughout his fleet beginning to pull back without orders. The psychological impact of facing an enemy that preferred death to defeat was breaking the morale of species that had lived in peace for millennia. Admiral Torvek's metallic form was flickering rapidly with distress. These creatures are completely insane. They're turning their own ships into weapons. How do you fight an enemy that views mutual destruction as victory? The answer came from an unexpected source, Dr. Helen. Carter's voice suddenly broadcast on all council frequencies from somewhere on Nexus Prime. You can't fight them, she said simply. That's what I've been trying to tell you for months. Humans don't surrender when they're cornered. They become more dangerous. You offered them the choice between freedom and safety, and they chose freedom. You offered them the choice between dignity and survival, and they chose dignity. You cannot defeat a species that would rather die free than live as slaves. Captain Lisa Parker's damaged ship rammed into a council support vessel, her final transmission. Barely audible over the static. Tell them we were here. Tell them we fought. Tell them we were free. The psychological break among the council forces was complete. Ship after ship began withdrawing from the battle without orders. Entire squadrons refused to engage human forces that fought with such desperate ferocity. The careful discipline that had maintained council military power for millennia crumbled in the face of an enemy that fought by completely different rules. War Commander Jalanath realized with growing horror that his species had created a civilization of sheep while humanity had remained wolves. The Council's offer of peace and prosperity had been rejected by a species that valued freedom more than life itself. All units, general withdrawal, he ordered finally, his voice heavy with defeat. Withdraw to minimum safe distance and await further orders. As the Council fleet retreated, President Rodriguez's final transmission followed them into space. We told you we would see you in battle, War Commander. Now you know what humans are willing to sacrifice for our freedom. We hope you've learned your lesson. 6 months later, the formal treaty arrived at Earth through diplomatic channels. The Galactic Council officially recognized human independence and established a buffer zone around human space that no Council vessel would cross without permission. The message was signed by all 12 founding members of the Council and carried a single additional note. The species known as humans has demonstrated capabilities and determination that make them unsuitable for standard Council integration procedures. They are hereby classified as an independent sovereign species with full territorial rights. Council policy is to maintain peaceful coexistence through mutual respect and non-interference. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral after his role in First Contact, received the treaty aboard the rebuilt Terra Nova. His response became the foundation of human foreign policy for generations to come. The human race has no interest in conquest or expansion into Council territory. We simply want to be left alone to determine our own destiny among the stars. Respect that desire, and we will have no problems. Threaten our freedom again, and you will discover that what you have seen so far was only the beginning of what humans are capable